For more on these and other foreign policy challenges, let's bring in Professor Aurel Braun of the University of Toronto. Aurel, always good to have you. First up, Trump calls his Ukraine peace plan unconventional diplomacy. Is that a fair description? How would you describe it?
Certainly this conflict that has cost so many lives is one that ought to be settled. It would be very important for the people of Ukraine, for the people of Russia. Now, the way President Trump is going about it, it is one thing to call it unconventional diplomacy. If you look at it from the European perspective, what they see is that there's far greater pressure on allies and more incentives for opponents. If you look at it from the Ukrainian perspective, this has more shades of 1938 Munich, and they don't see much that is unconventional about it, but they see much that is very threatening to their safety and sovereignty. So I think we have to be careful with the use of these terms by the Trump administration because historically, this is not necessarily unconventional, but so far, we have not seen the results that a radical change in diplomacy could potentially bring.
Aurel, look, going beyond Ukraine, right? Trump is now trying to broker calm between Thailand and Cambodia. And is this broadening American influence?
Certainly there's an attempt, and it is sort of ironic in a sense, but at one level, the United States is pursuing more of an isolationist policy. At another level, it seems to be more interventionist if you look at the Western Hemisphere, and also in an attempt to settle various conflicts. And you will recall that Mr. Trump has claimed that he has settled 7, 8, 9 wars, and that involves a great deal of diplomatic involvement on the part of the American administration, and that also goes to American power, soft power, as well as to credibility. The problem here is that when you try to look for an overall grand strategy, it's very difficult to discern one. It is also the case that Mr. Trump changes policy very rapidly and in unpredictable ways. But if we were to search for any kind of pattern in what they're doing, this is a type of return to great power politics, where Mr. Trump wants to deal basically with great powers such as China, Russia, India, and settle these other conflicts because these he views as merely disruptive rather than central to international peace. It is also the case that he seems to have a greater affinity often to opponents than he has tolerance for those who are allies. He is also searching desperately for a Nobel Peace Prize. And you will notice that Cambodia had nominated Mr. Trump for a Nobel Peace Prize, which is pursuing relentlessly. And partly this policy is also driven by personal relations that Mr. Trump has. He likes certain leaders, he gets along with certain leaders. In other cases, he tends to be rather petulant and even vindictive.
I want to go to like the on-the-ground tactics of Trump's diplomacy, because he kind of looks at problems and says, stop the war first, sort out the details later. Can we call that pragmatic or a recipe for future explosions?
If it would work in the long term, if it's a kind of shifting position where you resolve some of the issues and then the rest are easier to resolve, this is a kind of functionalist approach, then I think that would show promise. But so far, there's no indication that this has really worked. And the danger here is that you may have some superficial settlements that bring short-term relief, but they could cause much greater long-term problems. And the fundamental problems in many of these cases have not been sufficiently addressed. So this is the dilemma that obviously well-intentioned individuals would like to see the end of conflict. We want to save lives. But the difficulty is that you want to save lives not just now, but also over the long term. And one would like to see lasting settlements. And there are big questions as to whether anything that Mr. Trump has settled so far will lead to lasting settlements to greater international stability.
Yeah, and looking across Ukraine, Thailand, Cambodia, the DRC in Africa, right, Gaza, is Trump building a legacy of conflict resolution or just keeping the world busy?
He would like to see a legacy. And as I noted before, he's desperate to get the Nobel Peace Prize. He has said repeatedly that he deserves the Nobel Peace Prize. And if these settlements are lasting, this would be indeed a justifiable legacy. But so far, there's no indication. If you, for example, look at the conflict between Thailand and Cambodia, this goes back in some ways, to something more than a century ago. This division of territory when France ruled Indochina. This is not something easy to resolve. And you can see that despite claims made by Mr. Trump, including last night, that there is a ceasefire, that is not the case on the ground.
Yeah.
That in fact, these ceasefires are temporary, that perhaps as many as 800,000 to a million people have been displaced, and it remains a very volatile situation. So I think more needs to be done if he is to leave a real legacy, and if the United States is to play the role of stabilizer in the international system.
Yes, and there's something I'd like to follow up on because how do you see America's credibility, soft power, as you mentioned before, affected when U.S. peace proposals sound more like ultimatums than agreements?
Well, that's a very important question because in international relations, credibility is absolutely crucial. So the use of soft power and the use of hard power has to be done in a very parsimonious way, precisely because credibility is so essential. So if you use power, any kind of power, you have to make sure that there is a beneficial and lasting effect. If you are just trying to go all over the map, if you are just looking for some kind of headlines that seem to be positive, that boost your popularity, then in the long term, the credibility of any power, especially one like United States superpower, can be damaged. And this is the big question about the Trump administration. Is he risking American credibility in American power for short-term gain to boost his own popularity, to burnish his own legacy, to get that Nobel Peace Prize?
Aurel Braun, it's always good to consult you and have you on the show. Thanks.
Thank you.